We are now standing at 560 South Stone Avenue. We're about a mile from downtown Tucson. When Brother Green was asked by Brother Branham to come to the city of Tucson to start a church, Brother Perry at that time lived in Beaumont, Texas. He pastored a small church there. In 1964, he got a revelation that Brother Branham was God's prophet and messenger to this church age. It was then that after he decided to follow Brother Branham and attend as many meetings as he could. At the time, he owned about 5 corporations, 5 companies. And for him, in order to come and start a church here, he would have to get rid of all of those companies that he owned. Everything okay? And so he prayed about it, and within several months, he was able to sell everything that he owned. He then came to Tucson in 1965 in the summer to look for a building to start a church. He went to a lot of realtors and started asking them if there was a building that he could rent, because he did not know what size church they had available or anything. So he went to Brother Branham one day, and he said, "Brother Branham, I've been looking for a building now for about 2 weeks, and I've not been able to locate a place where we can have church service." And he said, "I'm a little disappointed, that I'm in this city and can't find a building." And he said, "Brother Perry," he said, "that's something you're going to have to learn." And he said, "You have to understand, it's not your battle, it's God's battle." He said, "When God gets ready to have a building for you, He will show you exactly where it is." Now, we did not know this at the time, but Brother Joseph Branham, Brother Branham's son, told us that when Brother Branham came to the rodeo parade that we have in Tucson every year for many, many years. It's the largest non-motorized parade in the world. And Brother Branham and Joseph stood across the street over there. And when they stood across the street, Brother Branham says on tape, and I can go over here and show you. They stood right over here across from this building that we're at now. Brother Branham said that all the bands were playing all these songs. He said, but when Brother Branham stood there, when they got right to where he was at, they stopped playing the songs that they were playing and started playing "Onward Christian Soldiers, Marching as to War." And they stood right across from this building that we're getting ready to talk about. A little while after that, just that weekend, a realtor called Brother Green on the phone and said a building just became vacant. So they brought Brother Green here to look at this building that we see behind us. This building was the first Jewish synagogue in the state of Arizona. It was opened in 1909, and this entire building was built for $4,712 American dollars in 1909. This building particular that we see behind us was called Temple Emmanuel, which means God with us. And the Jewish people has quite a heritage in the city of Tucson. And what happened over the years is that when that opened up, it had been many, many different churches. It had been all kinds of things. People used this building for many things. Because the Jewish people left this building in 1939 and opened a bigger church across the city. So in 1965, in November, Brother Green rented this building. 2 weeks later, they had their first service here. In the message, Brother Branham's first visit to Tucson Tabernacle, he talks about Brother Green following the leadership of the Holy Spirit, and him and Sister Green coming from Texas, coming to Tucson, following the leadership of God. And Brother Green thinks to himself, I did? Is that what I done? And he said, Brother Branham, I want you to have a place to where you can come here. Anytime you have a message on your heart, that you feel free to come and you can preach to us. And this pulpit is open anytime you want it. We also found out later that Brother Branham had gone home after learning that Brother Green had found this particular building. That what happened is that he went home and he told his wife, Sister Mita. And when he told his wife that Brother Green had found a building, he was so excited, he picked her up in his arms and wheeled her around like this and said, Brother Green has finally started a church for us here in Tucson. He was so excited and he was so happy to be able to do that. Okay, let's turn it off for just a moment. How's Eileen doing? One of the next services that Brother Branham had here was just before Brother Branham left Tucson to go back to Jeffersonville with his family. In that particular service, there were so many people that they had a communion service. And Brother Branham had communion here a couple of days before he left on December the 18th, 1965. We know that that night, Brother Branham left here. The accident occurred in Texas. And then on December the 24th, Brother Branham passed away. It was a shock to Brother Green because Brother Green had started this telephone hookup. He was getting ready to buy a camera to put Brother Branham on to start filming Brother Branham. He was going to buy a big projection camera, and when Brother Branham passed away, of course, none of that mattered. The church continued on here for many, many years. After Brother Branham passed away, it was packed out. In the back of the building, they put another building for the overflow crowd, and they put speakers in there so that people would have a place to sit down. When we're able to go in, when it's open, you'll be able to see the original platform. You'll be able to see some of the original pews that was left over from that time period. Also, you can see where the baptistry used to be. There's many stories about this building that we could go into, but to make a long story short, I'd just like to share two testimonies. The first testimony is in regards to Sister Margaret Johnson. She was the wife of Brother Nathaniel Johnson. When they first moved to Tucson because of Brother Nathaniel's health, she had heard that Brother Branham was going to be here. So she attended one of the services when Brother Branham was here, and it was so crowded. And she had so many questions she wanted to ask Brother Branham that she could never get to him. So she stood over there, and I think you can probably pan, you can see those double doors right there and the steps that's leading up to those doors. She stood on about the second or third step. Brother Branham was standing out here, and there was a bunch of people that was standing around him. And she's thinking in her heart, if I could just get to him and ask him a couple of questions, then everything would be okay. And while she's thinking this, Brother Branham, who had his back to her, like this, stops talking to the brothers, takes his hat off, turns around and looks up at Sister Margaret and said, Sister, everything is going to be all right. I'm sorry. I love that lady so much.
There we go. The gray stone.
Let me talk a little bit and then I'll let you zoom in on that. So, sorry about being a little emotional. I found out that the curator that started this history museum for the Jewish people, she passed away on March the 2nd. She was a very dear friend of mine. We shared a lot of stories together. And her being Jewish and me being Christian, we had so many things to talk about, especially when we talked about Israel. Because I've been to Israel several times, and she's been to Israel several times, and so we were able to share a lot of things, and it was just a wonderful time, and now she's gone on to meet the Lord. But I'd like to tell you another thing about this particular building, is that they put a time capsule in this building, and you see the gray stone over there near the steps. And behind that stone, they had put a time capsule there in 1910. In 2010, our church was invited to come to have an opening. They were going to open this time capsule. And they invited our Congresswoman, Gabrielle Giffords, who is Jewish. She was the one that was shot here in Tucson several years ago. And she was allowed to pull out a newspaper from 1910, and she started reading it to everybody. It was hilarious. And you know, she's opening it up and everything, and she's showing us what's in there. Well, Eileen told us that they were going to put another time capsule in there, and they asked us if we would like to put some things in there, and of course Brother Green said, yeah, of course. So what happened is that we put some of Brother Branham's materials in that time capsule that's in the cornerstone of that building. Later, after many years of being here, around 1970 to 71, we went from this building to 2555 North Stone Avenue, and that's where our church is today. God bless you.
Amen.
Is there any questions? So this is the last church service Brother Branham taught us, which was communion. Now, I'm not going to put this on tape, but Brother Branham